Yes, they are an indie band, and I'll fight anyone who says they aren't. The Arcade Fire, and We Used to Wait from the stupidly successful album, The Suburbs. Now, there's more to this definition of indie, but only if you live in the UK. But before we can go there, we need to talk about the word alternative. What does that mean exactly? Well, today, not so much, as you'll see in a moment, but the word did serve a purpose. Back in the late 1970s and early 80s, there were a series of American independent labels that became homes to bands rejected by the major label universe. They had names like Berserkly and SST. If your music was too weird and too out there for the major labels, it wasn't a lost cause. You might be able to find a home in one of these tiny weirdo labels which offered an alternative to the major label system. Artists who recorded for these alternative labels became known as alternative artists. Ergo, their music was alternative music. This phrase, alternative music, was interchangeable with college rock through much of the 1980s because that's where you heard most of the music, on college campuses and through campus radio stations. But by the end of the 80s, thanks to groups like REM, who grew up on IRS, one of the alternative labels that was big in the college rock universe, there was a growing strain of rock fan who preferred this music to whatever was happening in the mainstream. These two scenes ran in parallel with each other and almost never, ever crossed over. Until Nirvana and grunge, of course, which is when the two scenes merged, with the alt-rock side taking over. By the middle of the 90s, alternative music wasn't an alternative to anything. It was the mainstream. In the UK, though, alternative never really caught on as a term. Instead, the Brits stuck with indie, which essentially meant the same thing. Left-of-center bands that usually recorded for independent record labels. So, in Britain, indie, alternative, basically the same thing. But let's go back and hear a true alternative record. Jonathan Richman was from Boston, and after being rejected by the major labels, he found his way into a company called Berserkly, where he was encouraged to make music like this. This is from 1971.
1, 2,